The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the transport pod descended through the crystalline dome. Mara pressed her palms against the viewport, watching the assembled delegates, hundreds of species from across 3 spiral arms, turn their attention upward. She'd been a xenobiologist for 7 years, specializing in nonverbal communication patterns, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. "Remember," Kale's voice crackled through her earpiece, "don't make any sudden movements. The Velkar Cubs have rejected 17 diplomatic envoys in the past month. We're running out of options." Mara nodded, though Kale couldn't see her from the observation deck. The Velkar, massive leonine creatures whose civilization spanned 40 worlds, had recently discovered something that terrified the Council. Their young had stopped obeying commands. Not just from parents, but from everyone. Teachers, military commanders, even their own planetary leaders found themselves powerless, as an entire generation of Velkar cubs simply refused. The species faced extinction within 2 generations if the pattern continued. The pod landed with a soft hiss. Mara stepped onto the council floor, her boots echoing against polished stone. Before her, contained within a reinforced transparent barrier, 7 Velkar cubs prowled. Each stood nearly 6 feet tall despite their youth, their silver-blue fur rippling with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with their moods. Currently, those patterns showed deep crimson, aggression, fear, and defiance. Ambassador Throck, a towering Velkar elder with battle scars crisscrossing his muzzle, approached the barrier. His translator device rendered his growls into flat, emotionless standard. "Cubs, attend formation." The cubs ignored him, continuing their agitated pacing. "Cubs, this is a direct command from your Council Alpha. Form ranks immediately." Nothing. One cub actually turned its back on Throck, a gesture of profound disrespect in Velkar culture. Mara watched the patterns on their fur. Not quite random. There was a rhythm to it, a pulse that synchronized between them every few seconds. She'd seen something similar in her research, among Earth's social mammals when they felt threatened but were trying to establish new pack hierarchies. "May I?" she asked Throck quietly. The ambassador's ears flattened against his skull. 43 specialists have tried, human. Behaviorists, psychologists, even combat trainers. What could you possibly— "Please," Mara interrupted, keeping her voice soft. "Just let me try." Kale's voice returned to her earpiece. "Mara, the Council has authorized lethal containment if this fails. These cubs will be executed as a genetic aberration. This is your one chance." She approached the barrier alone. The assembled delegates murmured, a sound like wind through a forest of different worlds. Mara closed her eyes and listened. Not to the delegates, but to the cubs themselves. Their breathing, the scrape of claws on stone, the subtle shifts in their movements. Then she did something that made Kale inhale sharply from his observation post. She sat down. Cross-legged on the cold floor, back straight, hands resting gently on her knees. And she began to hum, not words, not commands, just a low, resonant sound from deep in her chest, a frequency she'd calculated based on the pulse she'd observed in the cubs' bioluminescence. It was a human sound, but pitched to match their rhythm. The chamber went absolutely silent. One cub stopped pacing. Its ear twitched toward Mara. The crimson patterns on its fur flickered, shifted toward amber. Curiosity. Another cub turned. Then another. Mara kept humming, steady and patient. She made no eye contact, issued no challenges. She simply was. Present. Calm. Unthreatening, but unafraid. The largest cub, a female with a distinctive scar over her left eye, approached the barrier. Her patterns cycled through amber to pale green. She tilted her head, studying this strange, small creature who didn't bark orders or make demands. Then the cub did something that made every Velkar in the chamber gasp. She sat, mirroring Mara's posture as closely as her feline anatomy allowed. Within seconds, all 7 cubs had settled around the barrier, their bioluminescence pulsing in perfect synchronization with Mara's hum. The crimson aggression faded completely, replaced by soft blues and greens. Peace, attention, receptiveness. Mara stopped humming and spoke softly. "You've been scared. Everything's been changing too fast, hasn't it? All the adults shouting orders, trying to make you fit into old patterns that don't feel right anymore." The scarred cub made a sound, not a growl, but something closer to a questioning chirp. "You're not broken. Mara continued, her voice carrying clearly in the silent chamber. You're evolving. Your species is becoming something new, and the adults are terrified because they don't understand. But I see you. You don't need commands. You need guidance. You need someone to listen before they speak. She stood slowly, placing one hand against the barrier. The scarred cub rose and pressed her massive paw against the same spot, separated only by transparent polymer. Will you let them teach you? Mara asked. Not through force, but through trust? The cub's patterns shifted to brilliant gold, the Velkar expression of profound agreement and joy. She turned to the other cubs and made a series of soft vocalizations. One by one, they stood in an orderly line, their bioluminescence showing peaceful blues. Ambassador Throck approached, his translator struggling to capture the emotion in his voice. In all my cycles, I have never. Human Mara, what did you do? Mara turned to face the council, suddenly aware that thousands of eyes were upon her. I didn't command them. I communicated with them. Your cubs haven't stopped obeying orders, they've outgrown them. They're ready for dialogue, not dictation. Your species is evolving towards something more democratic. Impossible, another Velkar delegate declared. Our hierarchy has stood for 10,000 years, and now it needs to adapt or die, Kale said, his voice amplified through the chamber's speakers as he descended from the observation deck. He reached Mara's side, his eyes wide with wonder. Mara, the council is already in emergency session. They're calling this the human protocol. They want you to teach it to every Velkar world. Mara looked back at the cubs, who watched her with intelligent, hopeful eyes. The scarred cub pressed her paw against the barrier again, and her bioluminescence formed a pattern Mara had never seen, documented, a complex weaving of golds and silvers that seemed to crown the cub's head like a circlet of light. An ancient Velkar, scholar in the upper galleries, stood abruptly. By the ancestral pride, that's the old mark. The pattern of choosing. These cubs haven't just accepted her guidance, they've named her their alpha. That's ridiculous, Throck protested. She's not even Velkar. She's what they need, Kale interrupted quietly. And maybe that's what makes her their queen. Mara felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. She hadn't come here to rule anything. She'd come to understand, to bridge a gap between species. But as she looked at those 7 hopeful faces, and then at the hundreds of delegates watching with a mixture of fear and desperate hope, she understood. Sometimes leadership isn't about being the strongest or the loudest. Sometimes it's simply about being the first one willing to listen. I'll help, she said finally, but not as a queen. As a teacher, and only if the Velkar are willing to learn alongside their cubs. The scarred cub's bioluminescence pulsed in agreement, and one by one the patterns spread, first to the other cubs, then to younger Velkar in the chamber, and finally, grudgingly, to the elders themselves. A new era had begun, spoken into existence by someone who understood that the most powerful words are sometimes the gentlest ones.